Peace and welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation. Folks, we got a lot to talk about. First, let's talk about how New York City Mayor Eric Adams is infusing technology with policing, and he wants to assure the citizens that, guess what? Big Brother isn't watching you. Big Brother is protecting you. We'll have that conversation. Also, U.S.-Africa Summit. It has happened, the 3-day weekend. We'll be checking in with Culture Crew member Anniv to get his take, his expectations, and opportunity for him to respond to some of the criticism of how the president brought 49 African leaders together. We'll have that. Also, let's talk a little bit about what's going on with Pele. We'll have an update on what the soccer star has done, on how he has changed the game, and so much more. So, folks, stay with us. There's a lot to get to on today's edition of The Culture here on the Black Star Network. Let's go. All right, folks, welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for being a part of the conversation. We got a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about tech and policing. We're going to talk about the U.S.-Africa Summit. And I've certainly, if you did not know, we're going to have a conversation around the 160th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation that was signed on January the 1st, 1863. We'll have a little bit of a conversation about that and the implication that has, and a whole lot more. So we're going to really get into some dope discussions today. Let's kick it off talking about what's going on in New York City, as Mayor Eric Adams has sat down with Politico to talk about his latest initiative of bringing crime down and getting guns off the street. The mayor has gone on record to say that it continues to be his number one priority, and he's got a little something to say to progressives and Democrats who warn him that being hard on crime may not be the sentiment of the people. He wanted to let people know, guess what, folks? Big Brother isn't watching you. Big Brother is protecting you, as the mayor is looking to integrate both technology and policing to help with the crime situation in New York City. Here to talk to us about this is our diversion, equity, inclusion specialist, Brother Anniv, to share with us his thoughts about the implications of the mayor's take on crime. Anniv, good to talk to you again, brother. How you feeling this afternoon?
Brother, I can't complain. It's a good day to be alive.
It's a great day to be alive, bro.
Yes.
It's a great day to be alive. Let's first talk a little bit about what's going on with the mayor in New York City. Mayor Eric Adams, he really doesn't cut any cards, Anniv, and he doesn't shy away from the fact that as much as that he is a mayor for the city of New York, he's also a cop. He has been towing the line between being hard on his police department in New York City, as well as dealing with the anger, with frustration, and just the overall unsatisfactory sentiments that people have about policing. He came on record. He did an interview where he promised, and then take a look at this, folks. This is from Politico, where he talked to them about technology-assisted policing. He said, Big Brother is protecting you. He's pledging stronger policing, more technology in 2023. In this interview, he said that he promised an expansion of technology-assisted policing to detect weapons over the past year. He has promoted the use of cameras and lauded divisive facial recognition devices. He's trying to employ all of these strategies. He says, quote, it blows my mind how much we have not embraced technology. And part of that is because many of our electeds are afraid. Anything technology, they think, oh, it's a boogeyman, it's Big Brother watching you. He said, no, Big Brother is protecting you. Now, let me share with you just some of the key things that he's looking to bring to the force in New York City, because he plans to use technology to detect guns, and he also is looking to deal with the surveillance issue that has often been the source of much controversy, especially in New York City. He's also looking to he's also looking to target crime in targeted neighborhoods before it was like he created a gun force task force, anti-gun unit, anti-gun unit, which is a band of officers that he previously sent undercover to combat crime in targeted neighborhoods before it was disbanded. He's looking to possibly restart that unit. But here's a mayor, Sinedu, that is not running away from controversial tactics when it comes to crime. When you look at the issue of the sentiment around policing, especially as you work in a space of diversity, equity, inclusion, how does this fit? How does a Black man who continues to tout very controversial views and tactics about policing, how does that help or hinder the conversation around progressive policing, community policing, and making sure that we have a better feeling about those who protect us?
I think, first of all, I think we should learn a great lesson about the idea of that he's Black. Remember, Ben Carson was Black, and so was Herman Cain, rest his soul. I think in this case of a Black man being a cop who is now mayor, I think he's a good guy, but I think he might be out of touch on what it comes to in solving crime issues. You cannot just solve crime issues with cameras alone and policing alone. Preventative measures don't always have to be so pervasive. It's important, and a lot of times folks ignore this, it's important to excogitate the exact issues that led to criminality. So you have to prosecute the causes of criminality rather than just criminality itself. And I think Eric Adams is falling under the same line of thought that every mayor before falls under. Criminals, we got to get rid of them. We got to get rid of them. If you cannot prevent or lead to things that can move away what leads to criminality, maybe he needs to take a page out of Mayor for Life, Marion Barry from DC. Take a page out of his book, because crime was a big issue until Marion Barry got there, and he made a change simply because he looked at what can we do to reduce crime, as in what caused the crime in the first place, and not just focus on, oh yeah, criminal. I think Eric Adams is kind of playing to his base. And I don't mean the people that elected him. I mean the systematic system of the officer is right. And I think that won't toe too well with him, with everyday constituents.
So if he's looking to put more resources behind the police department, right? And I mean, he has already kind of pushed back on that whole idea of defunding the police. Mm-hmm. So if he's looking to do more resources behind this department, that's going to create more division. How does a mayor put these things in place but plan to bring folks together at the same time?
He has a very tough, here is the issue. The issue is that the ultra wealthy in New York, right? They're the tax bracket that you want to still live there, because they pay such a high amount in taxes that they're actually able to fund a lot of these social things that the city needs. Where that becomes an issue is, yeah, if we're going to pay these high taxes, you need to sweep away our issue. And sometimes you need to sweep it away by any means necessary. And you end up becoming, in the middle of a rock and a hard place. I think what Mayor Adams needs to do is, in my opinion, get folks around him who are experts, who can somehow deal with both, who can appease the wealthy tax, bracket folk, as well as not displace those who have needs and who have issues in the city of New York as well. And it has to be a delicate dance where both sides of the spectrum are taken care of, because what we don't want, which is happening, is a mass exodus of those high-end taxpayers to move to Florida, because that's what a lot of them are doing. Not only those high-end, those cops are moving to Florida as well. I don't know if you're aware of what DeSantis is doing to lure them in. You need to find a middle ground, and that kind of begins with New York being for the New Yorker, and that hasn't been the case. New York is now for the highest bidder. So he has a hell of a lot to do, but putting more resources into police. I'll just say this. America is, let's leave police aside for a second. America is one of the most funded, well-funded militaries in the world. I think the budget for next year is $860 billion. No matter how much you fund it, it doesn't stop wars from happening, right? So it's funding police does not decrease crime. It does not. It does not. Holistically, it may hamper it or make the criminal, if you will, become more creative. It does not cease the crime. And I think he needs to take that into consideration.
Absolutely. We're going to take our first pause. When we come forward, we're going to continue the conversation with Sinedu. Folks, I want to get your comments from our online culture crew, and let's continue the discussion around Mayor Eric Adams of New York City wanting Big Brother protecting us. What are your thoughts about this? As this Black mayor, a Democratic mayor, is looking to embrace technology that is controversial, technology in the hands of an agency that has a horrific history of abuse, to use that technology against the people it's supposed to protect and serve. We'll have the conversation up next. Stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig? When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Folks, we have been talking about what's going on with tech and policing in New York City. As New York City Mayor Eric Adams has decided to integrate more technology, to put more technological resources behind the New York Police Department. Now, take a look at this. He's saying Big Brother is protecting you. He pledges stronger policing, more technology in 2023. And this comes at a cost at an agency that has already garnered $5 billion, with a B, folks, $5 billion of the city resources. Along with that, folks, here's the crazy part. Crime has actually gone up in New York City by 23.5%, according to over this past year, according to the recent data. Now, with that being said, Mayor Eric Adams, who was a former police officer himself in the city, has said that he continues to put his support behind the city, but at the same time, he's going to make good on that campaign promise of lowering crime and getting more guns off the street. We've been checking in with Sinedu Wakofor, who serves as a diversity, equity, and inclusion specialist, and to get his takes about this situation and the impact that it has on communities of color, and particularly, especially when so many Black and brown communities are already distrustful of police agencies. Now, folks, I want to hear from you. Join us in the conversation right now. Post your comments as we're streaming live on Facebook and YouTube, and we would love to get your thoughts about this. Sinedu, $5 billion. You made the point. We could put a bunch of money into crime prevention, quote unquote, but crime still went up in New York, 23%, nearly 24% in New York City alone. He's bringing back people that have shady past. He's also bringing back units, like I mentioned before, the anti-gun force gun unit. He's talking about facial recognition. He's talking about surveillance cameras. I mean, this is very problematic, especially in light of what we've already seen with policing in this country. But I'm looking at it like in terms of is this man tone deaf? And I'm not saying that he should be walking a very thin line, but I think just New York City is one of the most popular and most populous cities in the country. They can serve as a model on how this country does policing. And my great concern is, Sinead, is that that people might look at this and say, you know what? If New York can do it, why can't we do it in Baltimore, Chicago, Detroit, Los Angeles? Why can't we do it more? And I think it leaves a terrible bad taste in people's mouths when you know that you're not just being protected, but you're being watched, you're being hunted, you're being followed. I mean, it's crazy, bro. It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think we have to be careful. And I've said this many times. The biggest issue with technology, and I'm a big proponent for technology, but when we're talking about cameras that are using artificial intelligence and machine learning, artificial intelligence and machine learning have been proven to actually push racial disparity further. Because you have to remember, artificial intelligence is created by human beings. And a vast majority of the companies that are writing codes for AI are not Black. They don't look like the people that they surveil. So we've seen these issues in the manufacturing car industry, where the LiDAR technology was not able to pick up Black bodies in the way it picked up white bodies. And through simulations, the cars were hitting, Black folk. That's just one small example. When you don't have a vast majority of folks of African-American and Latinx extraction who are based in the technology that are now using to surveil people, you find yourself in a very precarious situation. And I think with artificial intelligence not being equitable at this current moment, I think that's very, very dangerous, where you'll now say that, oh, well, it's the machine. Machines don't make mistakes like humans do. But if they're built by humans, they can be programmed possibly to be racially discriminatory. And enough is not being said about that on the front end as it pertains to technology, but also on the back end as it pertains to funding African Americans and Latinx to have these degrees for companies. Facebook, for instance, they have about 1.9% of folks who are working in AI are Black. 1.9%. That is a dismal number. So we should be concerned about who is making this tech, who is behind the programming of this tech, who is monitoring this tech. People should be asking those questions.
Big questions, a lot of great questions. And I think your point is super, super valid, bro. Let's go to some of our comments from our online culture crew, folks checking in. Corinna, you are a New Yorker, but you said that you left New York City back in June of 2021. You said that you heard from so many folks who are still there how different NYC is becoming. I hear you. We also said, Corinna, you said that, let me make sure. You said anytime I would see heavy police presence in the subway, I never felt safe. My first thought was, why are y'all here? And let me hurry and get the hell out of here. Yeah. New York City, man. I mean, when you're talking about the relationship between the police department and the people, New York City and not LA, these are places that the history of their relationships is not good. It's not good at all. And Corinna, I understand. I totally understand why you would leave and why you would feel that way. Thank you, my sister, for checking in. Janelle, you checked in and said you can't just sweep away people as if they are quote unquote issues. Social programs need to address people's social circumstances, facts. Mayor Adams must bring in Black tech experts to make sure AI algorithms are adjusted. To your point, Sinead, because we're not seeing if 1.9, about 2% of those who are at the table, who are at the engineer's desk, are being are programming and making these decisions, and they might be in California. You know what I mean? And you got to create a device that has an algorithm that is not racially biased. And there has been studies shown, there has been some level of evidence to show that some of these new devices are racially biased. And so that brings up a great point. You got to bring it. And that's a hell of a thing when your technology starts to treat you worse than the people who use it. I mean, damn. You were thinking technology is all neutral and unbiased, and it is more biased. Great point. Ming Lee, Natasha Serge, you checked in and said building hip-hop museums won't stop the homeless from pushing people on the train tracks, Mr. Adams. So he got love for the culture, but the people, where's what to do with the mindset of the people? And that's the thing, though, brother Shanadu, I didn't understand. It's like, if people think that crime comes out of this place of this vacuum, that is just some aberration, like sometimes circumstances create criminals, right? You know, and I mean, you live in America long enough, you start to have some criminal thoughts yourself, especially if you are oppressed by poverty and you are oppressed by racism and you're oppressed by marginalization and you're oppressed by all of these things. You're going to start to think, you know what? I'm about to rob somebody. I mean, good people who have illegal thoughts. And I think that's why I think the conversation around crime and justice is wrong, because we're looking at the effect, but the real cause is what's driving people to commit crimes. Why is there such that, regardless of all of these strategies and tactics, why are people willing to risk their whole lives to do something criminal to where they might get little to no benefit from? That's the question I think we need to ask.
Yeah, and people don't like this, but I'm very much of kind of follow the timeline of how things happen. Crime didn't just appear. And to be very honest, New York had a history of criminals actually being whites, not blacks or Latin folks. What happened is we have to address those policies, right? When you redlined, right? That war on drugs, right? When y'all brought drugs into the community, let's not forget that these are all factual things that we can all research that the government had a hand in. My issue with America is America loves to talk about the output, but never talks a lot about the input. We have to remember how we got here. When you, as somebody who is in diversity, equity, and inclusion, I always tell people, it's okay to include people. It's okay to be diverse. The equity is the hard part. If you've done something wrong, your equity has now grown interest. You might need to add a little bit extra based on what you've done. And I think America does not want to grapple with that reality. There has to be an interest added to equitable measures. It'll cost billions upon billions to just rewrite the war on drugs, to rewrite good jobs, good employment processes. When we think about criminality, let's go back to family. These people who are now committing crimes, they were once children. What were their childhoods like? Why was their parents not in the house? Until you address that at a fundamental micro before macro level, we're just going to be sweeping and mopping around the same problem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll certainly keep our eyes on this situation, because I feel like in 2023, this is going to create more problems, not just financially. This is going to create more problems in terms of civil rights. This is going to create more problems in the relationship to men between police and community. This is not going to lead in a good place if we know American politics and how America handles the crime issue. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, let's switch gears. I want to talk about the U.S.-Africa Summit that took place earlier this month. Brother Shanadu had a chance to connect with some young African leaders and some of the heads of state during that time in Washington. We'll talk a little bit about the expectations and the criticisms of that union. So stay with us. More to coming at you here on The Culture, right here on the Black Star Network.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
an angry pro-Trump mob stormed the U.S. Capitol.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear. Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. Wanted to have a conversation with Brother Shinadu about that historic meeting of countries between the United States and 49 African heads of state who made their way to Washington, D.C. earlier this month to have a U.S.-African summit. Now, this summit was something that was started actually during the Obama administration. Of course, the Trump administration did not continue the tradition, but the Biden administration decided to pick it back up. And so they had a 3-day summit. It was the first inaugural summit that it was held by the administration since 2014, folks. This has been 8 years since there has been a conversation between the United States and African world leaders. Now, among the invited leaders to the 3-day summits, there was a number of leaders that came to the summit. However, there were some that were deemed to be quote unquote controversial, some that some people say should not have been there. So I wanted to talk to Brother Shinadu, who had a chance to be in DC during this time to lay out what he experienced at the summit. And more importantly, let's talk about the expectations and the criticism and what this summit means for the relationship between US and Africa, especially for the next generation. All right, Shinadu, you had a chance to be at this summit. I saw some photos. I follow you on social media, folks, and folks, y'all should do the same because Brother Shinadu is always busy doing something. But I saw some things. You were connecting with some of the younger, the next generation of African leaders, both here and on the continent. Let's talk about the expectations. Some people said that this was a farce. That people that when it comes to the United States, unfortunately has a history of not making good when it comes to rebuilding relationships with other countries. What were your expectations? Why did you decide to go to the summit?
Well, somebody had to be in the damn building. So I came with low expectations to just confirm what it is about. When anybody says that they're interested in working with Africa and youth in particular, because I try to remind myself, my dear, I'm not even in the youth class anymore, but I still make my way to make sure that we're not misleading the younger generation. So I wanted to confirm what I was seeing and to see what I could do to be a part and to help and what have you. And theoretically, this is what I believe it was. It was a complete orchestra with no conductor. So you had everybody there, but what was the purpose? What was the actual plan? You had, the President Madabayo of Sierra Leone talking about education and youth. You had the president of Ghana, Nana Akufo-Addo. He was talking very, very well, eloquent, great English speakers. But as somebody who is in DEI and somebody who is a communications major and kind of dabbled in PR, I noticed something. Everybody talked about youth, but I didn't see any representation of the youth of the African nations. That was my first concern. Now, what it was to me was almost like a photo op, because you had all these young professionals in the audience who seemed interested and eager to network, but where are the youth that the Africans said that they're supporting? You can't speak about youth and youth are not there. That was my anger with the Africans. Here's my anger with the Americans. One of my favorite people, former AU ambassador, Ariana Chihambori, she made a good point. She kind of assessed the event. She said, where was the dossier? Where was the plan? This is yet another game of America is the leader and everybody should be happy to be in Washington. The plans that America had, there was nothing sent to the African leaders. So the African leaders couldn't even come back with a rebuttal or with some type of proposal back. In my opinion, America wanted to just say, hey, Africa, we're your friend. And this is yet another way to get Africa away from the influence of China, Russia, and so on. But it was very, very, yes, America pledged $45 billion to the continent of Africa. That's not a big deal. Look how much we've given to Ukraine within a year. And we're giving a continent of 54 nations $45 billion. If we divide it equally, you do the math.
Damn.
The issue is, although America had a lot of great things to present, and now we're opening up an office of African American diaspora, if you will, which I think is amazing. It will be an office under the executive branch of the White House. My thing is, when Africa meets with China, when Africa meets with Russia or Europe about bilateral agreements or whatever, Africa is coming to the table as a partner, not as a student. And when America just presents their findings and what they believe Africa needs, you are yet again treating Africa as if she is infantile, as if she isn't, the birth of the world, as if she isn't resource rich, as if she isn't intelligent. And I feel like African leaders fell for the okie doke. It was a free field trip to Washington, if you ask me.
Wow. Ooh. So it was just could we say it was fluff, or is it just pomp and circumstance? And for the next generation of African leaders here and abroad, Brother Shanadu, do they have the same sentiment that you have right now?
See, a lot of people were confused, but it was fluff, because you have to understand this, right? I'm going to use why I gave my analysis. I have done rallies for over 12 years now, right? There are people who will come to a rally with me and get excited because they're like, ooh, I'm fighting the power. But what you don't know is, unless we're getting legislation on top of the rallying, the rally was just an event. It was just a thing. That's exactly how I felt about this. There was no law assigned. The Africans did not address the Congress, right? Vladimir Zelensky of Ukraine just got to America and he addressed Congress. There has not been an African delegation address Congress in over 20 years. Those are the hard-hitting things. Doesn't matter how it looks. Yes, we're at the Museum of African American History, designed by Sir David Ajayi of Ghana. Yes, we have to get away from symbolism. Where is the concrete? Because you wouldn't let China come to America for a summit, and you wouldn't think to not let them address Congress. So it was very fluff, a very high-level fluff. And I say it's a high-level pomp and circumstance, because if you look at it, it looks great. But when you cut into it, it's all baloney.
Damn. So what's your take on this? And folks, I want you to join us in the conversation. Throw your thoughts into the chat here. So streaming on YouTube and Facebook and on Black Star Network. So how do we handle that? Because, of course, here on this show, when we first brought it up that America was going to host this summit, a lot of folks, my online culture crew, Sinead, was saying, oh, man, this is going to be a disaster. Tell the African leaders, don't even make the trip. This is not, I'm wondering, is the relationship between Africa and Africa America and Africa, excuse me, is that relationship so damaged that it's irreparable at this point? It's just beyond repair. Or can there be some big things? I mean, for example, you brought up the point, which I think is a super valid point. African leaders don't address members of Congress. We don't see that. We haven't seen that. And you said in the past 20 years, Zelensky was able to come here, shore up his support. He walked away with making his influence even greater among American lawmakers and walking away with the bag, right? And military equipment. African countries are are starving. They're uncertain about the resources because of their relationship with Russia. I mean, you got a lot of issues on the table, and it was more of just handshaking, smiling and whatnot. What do we do with that? Like, for example, big question. Marcina Faith Albert asks, was Vice President Kamala Harris there? Do we have that type of backing there? Did you see the Vice President?
Yes, I saw her, and I was happy to see her partially, because that's another problem. So at the Youth Summit, because there was two versions of the summit, at the Youth Summit, which I stayed extensive time at from the beginning to the end of the day of the first day of the conference, what I noticed is like you were sprinkling in black faces to say, hey, look, Africans, there's a black person. Kamala Harris was there. She spoke very well on behalf of the United States. But what my thing is, there wasn't deeper dialogue. She came in, she spoke, she left. That was it. And if we keep saying that youth are the future, we can't keep dangling figures in front of them and not allowing there to be a back and forth dialogue. Granted, I know that was a busy day because I think that's the same day where the U.S. signed that law that protect interracial marriages, I think same-sex marriages as well. Yeah. And I understand that they were at the, back at the, she had to go back to the South Lawn. But even Anthony Blinken, who led the charge, he started off the day. So Anthony Blinken came, Kamala Harris was there, even White House Press Secretary Jean-Pierre, she was there as well. She moderated a very strange plenary, and it just looked very forced. Cory Booker was there. It's like throw all black people in a space and give good black representation. And to me, it was great seeing Kamala, but it would have been greater
to have a conversation,
dialogue. Because if Xi Jinping was there doing a China-U.S. thing, America stays at the table and doesn't leave. And that is what Ariana, the former ambassador to the AU, was saying, that we're not giving the same respect. And there's a lot of dancing and dalliances that show that. And what we can do to fix it is African leaders can say, look, we're not coming unless we get some type of documentation that explains what America's goal is 5-year, 10-year, so we can come with our own plans and our own rebuttals. But at the same time, Africa is in the very good seat, because guess what? They can still take money from Russia and China. And if the United States wants to curb that influence, then y'all gonna have to cough up that money with less strings. And I think that puts them in a position where they can get money from both sides and do what they believe is good for their future.
Look, we got to take another quick pause. When we come forward, more talks with Brother Shanadu talking about this U.S. Africa summit that was taking place earlier this month. And I want to get some comments from you. So stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch! A real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Folks, we have been talking about the U.S.-Africa summit that took place earlier this month with our culture crew member, Sinedu Wakofor, who was on the ground in D.C. to take part of the activities and who has not shown a great enthusiasm for what took place for that 3-day summit time, where African leaders and the next generation of young African leaders decided to come to Washington to get a better understanding of what the relationship between this country and the continent will look like. Brother Sinedu, I'm wondering, we're talking about U.S.-Africa summit. Africa, as you pointed out, 54 nations, we're a country. So it's not like a North America summit meeting a North America and Africa, two continents, but we're a country. And it speaks volumes about the power that the United States still wield in the world to say, okay, I'm going to call 49 of these African countries together to bring them to Washington. It reeks of power move, right? It doesn't really give it doesn't show that there is some solidarity, there's some independence, some strength that these African countries really have to say, no, America, we're not coming on your conditions. We're going to have this conversation on our conditions, on our turf. We're going to have it in a different way. Did that come up in a conversation that U.S. is calling for folks to come to us instead of us making the effort to go to them?
Yes, and I think you made a very astute. I can't even think of the word, but you made an astute point, because when you think of the U.S. saying all 54 African countries come together, that shows you that you view Africa as this homogenized group. And as Black people, we see that as well, even Black Americans, where we're all homogenized as if we're all one things. But you have to understand that the needs of the folks in Marrakesh, Morocco are not the same as those in Mogadishu, Somalia. And I think America, no matter how intelligent she is, her intelligence is never shown when she chooses to say that, even though I know this, I'm the boss, so I'm going to act on this. There wasn't even a region separation where it was like Africa U.S. Summit, Northern region, Southern region, West, East. Because what's going on in Eastern Africa with Ethiopia and the Tigrayan war that just recently ended is not the same issue that's going on in Sierra Leone, who has issues with road infrastructure and mudslides and stuff of that nature, or what people are suffering for in the Southern African region with South Africa with electricity and power shedding. And I think because everybody looks at Africa's problem as one major thing, you actually miss out on the real problems plaguing Africa. Infrastructure. Who's going to help us create infrastructure so that you can get from Ghana to Gabon without having to fly to Europe first? Who's going to help us with telecommunications so maybe we can get AT&T and Verizon down in Nigeria or down in Ghana instead of using Etisalat or using Huawei, who we know is China-based and they have issues with espionage. Those are the issues that America should be solving. When China built the African Union, when China built the African Union building, I think it's in Ethiopia, there was, when they got a private contractor to come, They realized that there was so much recording equipment, espionage equipment. That's what America should be combating. If she doesn't play those same games that she accuses China of playing, that's what we need you all here to do. Let's talk about the real economic issues. What are we doing about education? What are we doing to strengthen the educational system? So since America isn't too open to immigrants, shout out to Title 42, what can we do to strengthen the borders in Africa so folks aren't quick to leave? How do we help the manufacturing sector so that the mining sector in Africa can go to a higher level and you don't need to just remove the raw materials? That's what we need to be talking about. Solar energy. Why was that not at the top of the list? How can we get Africa to be the #1 producers of photovoltaics, since they have the best region for the intensity of the sun? That's what wasn't discussed. That's my issue. When you look at Africa as she needs help, you look away from all of the resources and things that she just needs help developing.
Right. And your point, you talking about, I made an astute point. The fact is that you said that all of these countries operate differently. Of course, each country in Africa has different needs, and it just wasn't addressed. And I think, and I'm so happy, my brother, that you brought this point up, that even us Black folks, we tend to put all of Africa in this melting pot, as if each country doesn't have its own personality, its own tradition, its own culture, right? Marcina, you talked about this in your comment. You're saying that each country is its own cultural hub. Like, we as Black folks, we talk about Africa as the motherland, as if this is just some wide expanse of land with no personality, no boundaries. You know what I mean? And when I think of Africa, we think about, of course, we think about South Africa. We think about Ghana. We think about Libya, right? Are there any particular countries, and I'm thinking more like Libya right now, Brother Sinedu, are there any particular African countries that can kind of lead the way? When Muammar Gaddafi was among us, he wanted to start a revolution. And when you read the real history of Muammar Gaddafi and how his manifesto, the Green Book, when he talked about the revolution that Africa should be going on, should be taking, are we seeing that type of leadership emerge today? Was that type of leadership present at the conference? Was that type of leadership discussed? How do you bring in other people who have relationships with Africa to the conversation based upon what happened at UN? At the U.S. African Summit. So it's kind of a two-part question, but do we see some new leadership that's coming that follows the footstep of like Libya and some of these other countries?
So I think no, and not in the way Muammar Gaddafi moved, and rest his soul. And that's why he's actually dead, because he was too visionary. What Africa is doing now is it's doing its factions, where you have the Africa Union doing their thing. You have ECOWAS, Economic Countries of West African States. They're doing their thing. The Eastern Bloc, they're doing their thing. And I think there is benefit in that because, like I said earlier, the needs of Africa are not all the same. So you do your thing, we do our thing. Most importantly, let's make sure that we're talking and that we're setting standards upon our things, right? If your issue is infrastructure and my issue is electricity, or what have you, let's make sure that both are solved at the same grade, same level of standard. The issue is there is no African leader doing that, and the simple reason is because colonialism still is good and alive. You should have seen how many people cried when Queen Elizabeth died. France still has a big hand in Africa. France is still supporting a lot of African leaders. I mean, look at trying to think of his name, President of Cameroon. He's been president for 30-something years, and they're still supporting Paul Biya is his name. They're still supporting these dictators that are. It's funny, you kill Muammar Gaddafi for leading that long, but you don't mind Paul Biya, who's been president for almost 38 years. You don't mind Yoweri Museveni in Uganda, who's been president almost 40 years. Y'all keep them alive. And that is to destabilize Africa. When Africa wanted to create ECOWAS did that. ECOWAS, the Economic Countries of West African States, they have a passport where now you can travel throughout all of these West African states with one passport. They wanted to make a currency, the ECO. That was an issue. The issue is Africans joining to form a more perfect union, for lack of better words, is difficult because not only of the separation of the different tribes and making them into one country, Africa is led by so many different ideologies, and everybody's more concerned with why must you be the leader? Why must you be the leader? But I think where we are now is great democratic leaders in Africa are now being used as subject matter experts to quell issues. For example, with the Tigrayan war in Ethiopia, you had former president of Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta, and former president of Nigeria, Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, and Olusegun Obasanjo, who now worked as intermediaries. That is where Africa is now. And as far as I'm concerned, we won't get back to that Muammar Gaddafi Africa ideal, but this kind of leadership based on the OGs, I think that could be a good space for Africa to find herself for now in this iteration that she's in.
Absolutely. Great space. You know what, Sinedu, I'm just so grateful, brother, that you were there to be present for the summit, but more importantly, to give us some context and analysis of not just what was said, but what we really need to work toward, because your insight and other young leaders, and I know you say I'm not young, but you really are young, brother. You know what I'm saying? You are next generation in so many ways. So I'm just grateful that we can even have this conversation and to bring it to the forefront that next generation African leaders need to be at the table, not just as a prop, but as a substantial partner, as those who have a voice. Because guess what? If somebody in the leadership right now currently is assassinated or they decide to step down, you need to have next generation leaders to step up. Sinedu, I appreciate you so much. I thank you for your time with us today. Always a pleasure, brother. And God willing, we'll reconnect in the new year to get more insight and bring so much more analysis that you do. Thank you, brother, for being so good for the culture. And God willing, we'll see each other next year.
Thank you so much, Farajii, and Happy New Year, man.
Happy New Year, brother. All right, folks, we got to take another quick pause. When we come forward, let's talk about the 160th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation with podcast host Nir Muhammad. Stay tuned. That conversation is up next here on The Culture, here on the Black Star Network.
Pull up a chair. Take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Folks, welcome to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversations today. If you missed the first hour of the show, don't fret. Just go back and check out the replay right on Black Star Networks. We continue to bring you conversations that are relevant and, more importantly, that speaks to our culture and plead our case and tell our story. So make sure y'all check out the replay at blackstarnetwork.com. All right, folks, I wanted to switch gears because as we talk about Africa and the future of Africa, let's go back to history and looking at the implications that has been made, especially for our sojourn from the motherland to this part of the world Of course, we have been in this country for well over 460 years. And many people are wondering, especially at this time of year, what have we gained? How far have we come? Now, we're celebrating the great celebration of Kwanzaa that allows us to talk about some of the key principles of family and community. But did you know that on January the 1st in 1863, 160 years ago, the great document, the Emancipation Proclamation, was signed by President Abraham Lincoln? This is the document that essentially opened up the door and the national conversation about about chattel slavery, and that eventually led to the freeing of our people who were enslaved. And so the questions become, what has happened in that 160-year period, as we are just days away from celebrating the signing and the creation of that great document? Here to share her analysis about this is the host of Queen Talks with Nira. She's an artist, she's a screenwriter, and she's doing a dynamic job, always talking about the issues, especially as it relates to history of our people. Nira Muhammad. Nira, dear, how are you?
I'm great, Farajii. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. All right, let's talk a little bit about this. This is actually something that you have taught in the classroom. About the Emancipation Proclamation. First and foremost, 160 years ago, I did not put it together until recently. I was like, damn,
that's recent.
This is pretty recent. like we there are actually some of our people, great grandmothers who've been around for 100 years, and there's probably not that many generations, but. Why is this important? Why is this document so important? And, you are one that like to dig a little deeper. There were some misperceptions about this document, the signing of it, the context of it. Talk to us about this.
I mean, I think, Farajii, anytime we talk about the freedom of our ancestors, I think that's very important. But I also think that it's very important to remember that Black people, in so many ways, we freed ourselves. But I think that when you think about the date of the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, or the date that it was issued on the very first day of the year. It was issued on January 1st. And I think that that's something that's overlooked when we think about the significance of the issuing of the Emancipation Proclamation. Like, from a very fundamental, holistic viewpoint, it was signed or issued on the very first day of the year. And that means something. It's for me, that's a sign of rebirth. It's a sign of turning a new leaf. It's a sign of, in so many ways, I know we celebrate Juneteenth as like our freedom date, but again, that was in Texas. You know what I'm saying? Like the Juneteenth represents Texas being freed, but the signing, the date that it was signed and issued was on the 1st of January. So in so many ways, that's also a significant holiday for us as Black people in America. It's a big day for those of us, my family fought in South Carolina. My great-great-grandfather was actually a lieutenant in the Civil War. And so when you think about those individuals who were on, that side of the United States at that time, or the Union at that time, this is significant. It's very significant. I think that when we look at celebrating our New Year's, I think that now this is something that we should be including in our celebration, and something that we should be talking about more on that date.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because it was because of the Emancipation Proclamation that Black men were able to officially join the Union Army. And because this, of course, the idea of Black men and Black and white men fighting alongside was just super, super radical.
Washington, I mean, they were let's be real, the Union was losing. Right. To be very clear, and that's why I always say, take it with a grain of salt. Yes, the Emancipation Proclamation was written, but it was written for a reason. It wasn't necessarily written out of love for Black people. That's just being honest and real and truthful. We were needed. The Union was losing. And they needed soldiers, and so it's like Black people were like, "Listen, go ahead, we'll fight for you, but we need our freedom. We're fighting for our freedom." And so in so many ways, Black people freed themselves. They were the ones who said, "No, you're losing. We can even accredit Frederick Douglass for helping out with those conversations with Abraham Lincoln. As you guys know, many people don't know, but they did have a very close relationship. And I think that so many of Abraham Lincoln's decisions to help Black people in any way that he did was because of his relationship with Frederick Douglass. And Frederick Douglass was really influential during that time. And so I think that it's really important to, and that's Baltimore too, so I get a little excited about that, that history. But being honest, Black people, we freed ourselves. We were needed. We were necessary in order to keep the Union whole, because the Confederacy was winning. Hatred will get you far. Greed will get you far. Money will get you far. And so it was necessary for Abraham Lincoln to sign that document because he knew that he was going to lose. And here we are today. So,
and I'm glad that you brought that up. It was because of that need, right? That the War Department in Washington created the United States Colored Troops unit, which was actually led by white officers. And Donna Brazil, who was a Democratic strategist, she wrote this fantastic piece for the Griot around this very topic of the 160th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation. Folks, y'all should definitely check it out. But she talked about these things. The second piece around this was that it helped persuade Britain and France not to enter the Civil War on the side of the Confederacy, because both of these Union nations were considering as a way of expanding their influence in the Americas.
Yeah.
That the chattel slavery that we were enslaved by and suffered under was not just a national issue, it was an international business model that other countries felt like they can benefit from.
Yeah, you can look and see where France had slaves. That's Louisiana, that territory. They still have a lot of, that's why they still have the French Quarter. A lot of Louisiana is influenced by France because that was their territory. But we have to remember, if you go back to the American Revolution, one of the biggest reasons why the American Revolution took place was, one, of course, money and taxes. But two, it was because Britain said, we're done with slavery. They wanted America to be done with slavery in the way that America still wanted to carry on slavery. So the biggest piece of the American Revolutionary War, even though George versus George, they both hated each other. King George was poor with money. He was a horrible king. He just wanted tax and all that. There's a money side to it. But the biggest part was that America was like, we're not giving up our slaves. And so that is why we fought Britain, because Britain was like, well, we kind of did away with slavery. You can't do it like that anymore. And America was like, hell no, this is how we make our money. So, Britain and America, they've been bumping heads since America got, lack for better words, got big balls. Like once slavery took off the way that it did for the Americas, they were like, Britain, we don't need you anymore. We're a powerhouse on our own.
Right.
And so that's where the American Revolution comes from.
That's a great point. The other thing about the Emancipation Proclamation, something that you've actually taught your students on, was that it allowed, it created the conversation or paved the way for the 13th Amendment to be ratified on December the 6th, 1865, which was the amendment that abolished slavery throughout the United States. And that 13th Amendment is still one of the most controversial amendments, considering where we are in the conversation about incarceration of Black men and brown-skinned men in America. What's your take on that? When we look at that amendment, that amendment is still effective. It still has power and influence.
I think that our government loves red tape. I think that we use language and we use semantics to justify our actions. I think that's something that has been seen throughout the history of, many politicians and business leaders using certain red tape to get around certain laws. And I think that when you look at the prison system, when you look at, even when you talk to the men and women who are building furniture, for example, I know Ethan Allen, they were a very big company who a lot of their furniture was made from prisons. They benefited off of the prison system. And so Ethan Allen, I think they've been bought and sold at this point. But a lot of our major corporations, a lot of the products that we use have been made and produced in prisons where they're making 17 cents an hour. Or nothing. That is slavery. And so our government might say, well, they gave up their rights when they became a criminal. So I think that those are laws that go beyond my scope of understanding, but I definitely could see how slavery and the prison system could be very much so correlated, and how that could be, the prison system could be used as a legal way of slavery in today's time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it opens up the conversation about the historic origins of many of these companies, right? And when we talk about how this country became the power, you mentioned powerhouse. When we talk about how this country became the powerhouse it did, and you look on Wall Street and you look at your major banks, those banks that were Lehman Brothers and banks that were small companies, small businesses during chattel slavery period, when we were in chains,
you talked about Harvard recently.
As a result of the cotton industry that grew as a result of our people being traded and sold, they built their riches off of that. And that's why I think it's even important that we have a conversation. It's like, you can't talk about America and the impact that this transatlantic slave trade had on, I mean, it affects Wall Street. It created Hollywood. Our pain gave birth to a nation.
I mean, we had the railroad system. And even when it became jobs, I mean, they weren't being paid fair wages. They were dying. They were putting their life on the line every single day to build this country from the ground up. I mean, Benjamin Banneker designed the layout of Washington, D.C. I mean, there's so many things. Our history is woven into the fabric, into the architecture of America, and we have never received that compensation. Whether it's Henrietta Lacks, I mean, I think her family finally received like some compensation, but to the scope and scale that her cells have been used, the billions of dollars that have been made and profited off of a Black woman's cells, we'll never be compensated, we haven't even gotten reparations. We're still trying to talk about reparations. We can't even go to college for free in this country.
That's a great point. So what, and we got to take a quick pause, but I want to get your take on this, because this part of the history still seems kind of fuzzy. You know what I mean? Like we talk about the Emancipation Proclamation as if it's just, it abolished slavery. And of course, again, it paved the way for that. But there were some long range implications of this document, not even just the fact that it was politically motivated. And like you said, it didn't come from out of an altruistic space. It came out of a political benefit space. And I'm wondering, how do we have a different conversation about that in the classroom? And then how do we have a different conversation about that among our people for the culture?
I mean, Farajii, this is one of those. I'm pausing because I'm literally remembering like my first year teaching 5th grade. I had a little white boy in my class. I had about 3 little white boys in my class. No, it was 4. But one of them loved history. I mean, this was like white boy, like long white boy hair. And I remember, I love history. And the 5th grade curriculum talks a lot about the American Revolution up to like the Reconstruction era of America. And so it was just obviously one of my favorite curriculums to like write and teach or whatever. So long story short, my student was just like bragging about all these things that we were learning in history to another 5th grader who was in a different class. And the 5th grader from the other class was like, what? Like, wait a minute. We didn't learn any of that in class. And he was like, dang, I'm so sorry, bro. Like, we have so much fun in history class. We even get to reenact the wars. And I'm just like, hold up, pause. I mean, there's a lot of flexibility in the education system, where teachers get to choose what they get to teach and how they want to teach it. And so I think that unless it becomes a standard that Black history has to be taught, because even in teaching about, American history, it's not really taught that deep in depth from the Black perspective. It's always taught from the white person's perspective. It's always taught from the American perspective. And let's be real, we weren't seen as Americans during slavery. We were property.
Right.
We weren't American.
Right.
So when we think about history is not from the Black perspective. It is from the American perspective. There's so much that we don't learn about Black history, even down to our inventors. We're taught that everything, it's all Thomas Edison. It's, so, I mean, it's a whole rewrite of the curriculum. It's a whole rewrite of Black households and what we decide to teach our children, the type of books that we buy for our children, because they're there. The history's there. It's just that it's just left untouched.
All right, here's a question, and then we got to jump to a quick pause. But here's a question: like, do we say in this course of this like acknowledgement and celebration, quote unquote, of January 1st, 1863, do we say that we were freed or we were or we were liberated? And here's why I'm saying making the difference, the distinction is that yes, slavery was abolished, but does it lend itself to independence?
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? Like yes, the institution of slavery. But is it truly our Independence Day, quote unquote? Like we see with Juneteenth around the conversation around around Juneteenth.
I see it as our acknowledgement day. It was on that day that we were acknowledged. And it was written. Once something is written, it's set in stone. Just like nowadays, if you put something on the internet, it's there forever. It's imprint. Yeah. That was the day that we were acknowledged.
So you wouldn't go as far as to say this was like an Independence Day?
No, I wouldn't say it's an Independence Day, but I would say it's our acknowledgement day. It was a day that it was written as, no, we are human. We are American. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, no, we weren't physically free. We still even, we've made so many strides as Black people, but the fact that we have to say we've made strides as Black people, that shows how little power we still have. Every time if we have to celebrate every little accomplishment, that shows you how far we have not gone.
I want to hold on that point because you're about to take me into another place. You're about to take the conversation to another place. Folks, look, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, we'll continue to have the conversation with writer and activist and artist and podcast host Nira Muhammad. I want to get your take on this conversation as we address the 160th anniversary of the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, January 1st, 1863. Stay with us. The conversation continues with you and Nira here on The Culture, right here on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about Blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland@RolandSMartin.com. Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol,
we're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate Black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
Folks, we are continuing our conversation talking about the 160th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation that was officially signed on January the 1st, 1863 by President Abraham Lincoln. Of course, this is the great document that opened the door for the 13th Amendment for the abolishment of slavery. This is also the great document that opened the door for blacks to serve in the military. And this is the great document that many people say is probably more important than some would say is more important than the Constitution, especially for black folks in this country. We've been talking about this acknowledgement with educator. She's a writer. She's the host of Queen Talks with Nira Muhammad podcast. Nira Muhammad is joining us here today. This is interesting, and I wanted to get back to that point about you saying, look, this is a day of acknowledgement, not a day of independence, right? And I think that this opens up the door for a peculiar part of the conversation, because black folks, when you look at black people in this country, we make up about 12 to 13% of the national population. And we have the peculiar history of once being chattel slaves, enslaved in a chattel way, like animals, and rising, overcoming all of the challenges to be, even like you said, to be seen as human beings, right? Of course, we produced one president. Of course, we have in so many different spaces, we are present, right? Not enough, but in a lot. And it's just, when I was just reflecting over the break, Nira, when I was just thinking to myself, this is very, very interesting. Like, we as black folks, like, I don't know if white people have the same level of historical moments that they need to reflect on for their progress as a people as much as black folks do. When we have January 1st now, 1863, you mentioned Juneteenth. When we talk about these big milestone moments of us just, again, celebrating or acknowledging, rather, our humanity.
Yeah.
And that's very, like, peculiar for me, that we're in the country of our oppressor, the country of our captors, and we have to acknowledge our own humanity. I don't know if that's resonating with anyone else, but this conversation is making me that like I have to marinate on that to say, damn, 160 years ago, my ancestors were considered to be property. 160 years ago, my people were not seen as a people at all. 160 years ago, we were written off as 3/5 human being in some cases, right?
Yeah.
Right. And now we're at this place.
I mean, we're at a place where people still look at us that way.
Right.
It's just not written in law anymore. And so that's what's important about it. It's like, we're not going to always change people's views of us, and that's fine. But in writing, that's what matters. What matters are laws. That is what matters. And we don't think about that. We're always wanting to feel accepted by our oppressors. We're always wanting to be like our oppressors. We learn their history. We speak their language. We apply their customs to our lives. We worship their God. You still see Black people praying to a white Jesus, and that's slavery. We became Christians through slavery. We lost our land in Africa. We were given, we lost our land and we were given a Bible and told to become Christian. And so when you look back at the history, it makes you question a lot of things. And those are histories that some of us don't want to look back at. We don't want to question how we became who we are, why we are the way that we are, why we believe what we believe. We don't want to question that because we've already become too assimilated in who we are. We're fabricated in white culture. And unfortunately, it has made so many of our people not even want to learn their history or not even feel like their history is relevant. I've heard so many young people say, why do I need to learn my history? That's not relevant. You hear people say, oh, slavery was X amount of years ago. Get over it.
Right.
But you would never hear someone say that to a Jewish person, to get over the Holocaust.
Nope.
You would never. I can never tell a Native American to get over the
Trail of
decimation of millions of people. There are tribes that we would never know. We'll never know their history.
Right.
Because they were decimated. And if you even go back in history, I'm gonna, this is me throwing my white flag to white culture, because guess what? They did the same things to themselves. There are so many white civilizations that Rome destroyed, that other Mediterranean countries, powerhouses destroyed, that we will never know all of their history because of power and greed.
It's and I mean, so many people from our online culture crew, they're like chime in and say, yes, absolutely, yes. Like this is just 160 years ago, folks.
That's it.
I mean, in the big scheme of things, right?
That's like 3 generations. If
some people say 4 generations, right? 4 generations. Now, that speaks to a couple of dynamics in our sojourn. That speaks to the fact that in a short period of time, we went from nothing to a little bit of something, right? Like we've made great strides. So that could be the quote unquote, the silver lining of our sojourn in our experience. But it's just 160 years ago. And we can say 170 years ago that we were considered nothing. And I mean, we were just, and I mean, like you said, Nira, like we're still seen by that in some cases, but that is so fresh on the psyche of a country.
Yeah.
That it is absolutely an insult. I mean, it is an egregious insult for us to be told that was yesterday. Don't worry about that. Y'all shouldn't be, you know what I'm saying? That's old news. That's an insult to me and to everybody that I represent.
The newness and the freshness of slavery is still here. We have people, I remember you had me on here where a white couple bought a old slave home shack and turned into an Airbnb. That's how new this shit is. Our structures are still there.
Whew.
Our pain is still there. That's, you can't even, I bet you if we go to different parts of the South and we just dig, we'll find bones. Let's be real. How many Black men were lynched? So when you think about the end of slavery or the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation only being 160 years ago, let's talk about all the things that have happened to Black people in between that time. Emmett Till's movie just came out. Let's talk about the strange fruit that we've been. Let's talk about our inventions being passed off to white people. Let's talk about us being experimented on for vaccines. Let's talk about Black women being mutilated for gains in the gynecological research. I mean, that's so much stuff that we could talk about that happened in between there that prove that, in some ways, yeah, this may have just been a piece of paper, but guess what? That piece of paper is something that we keep pushing in their face, that we can constantly push in their face.
That's real.
You know what I mean? Like every single time we're treated like we're less than, we can push this piece of paper in their face.
Right.
Because it's not to say that it's gone away, that we've been treated better, that the Reconstruction era and Jim Crow and all those things haven't happened, that right now, today, we're not still fighting for our rights. We're not going to say that, but we have this piece of paper to say, no, you said in writing that I was free, that I was worthy, that I'm a part of this country. Don't take it back now. Now I need you to show up.
Yo. Let me tell you something. All right, let me get some of these comments because I'm getting fired up and very reflective at the same time off of the discussion. So let's go to what our online culture crew is checking in and say, Lana, you are fired up, sis. I always appreciate you, Lana. You say, look, my mom picked cotton. This is how close we are to the situation, y'all. Lana said, my mom picked cotton. I chopped it. I saw my great grandmother's scars. We got to connect to the struggle. Connect us to the history, King Farajii. This is news. Come on, Nira.
Oh.
There it is. There it is. Right there, Lana. Appreciate you. And I love you so much for that love and for that passion. Always a loyal watcher of Black Star and in the culture. P. Jackson, you checked in and said, my great-grandfather was a slave. Is that 4 generations?
Same. Remember, Farajii, when my family did the big thing where they even showed us like his picture, like with his hat on. Like I was like blown away. Like that's my paternal grandfather. Like
right. And
just
how long
to see
ago?
a picture of him. And to see a picture means like, guys, like this wasn't that long ago. Like I have a photograph of my grandfather in his Union like Civil War outfit. Like that's how close this was.
Like that's super close.
Super close.
Like some of our great grandparents were born into slavery, into chattel slavery.
Yeah.
And if God blessed them to live to this time, they can actually give us stories. They can actually tell us what that experience is like. That's how close we are to coming out, quote unquote, of that experience. I mean, I don't know. I mean, this thing is just hitting me like, whoa.
It's so close.
Super close, man. That's super close. And so I know for me, again, don't come at me with that bullshit talking about that was long ago. Like that was maybe 2 days ago. You feel what I'm saying? In the big scheme of things, it was just a small period of time that is and is it crazy for us to have conversations about the social ills, the impact of chattel slavery, the impact of that institution on how we think and how we behave today? It's not crazy because the proximity of when things have happened.
Yeah.
It's not crazy for us to make the connection between y'all have experienced trauma on a massive level. And as a result of that trauma, this is how it's played out.
You know what's so crazy, Farajii?
Yeah.
When I look back at slavery and I look back at the 160 years that we've been in after,
yeah,
I can't tell you which one I think is actually worse. Because the fear that our people had after slavery, I think about the era after the Reconstruction period, when we were literally being picked up off the streets and hung, and our homes were being burned. That, to me, is one of the scariest eras of Black history. The era where I don't know if my son is going to come home or if I'm going to see him hanging from a tree. For me, that era of Black history still kind of, in American history, that one scares me the most, I think. That one scares me the most. And that happened after slavery, well after slavery. And not well, but it happened after slavery. And just thinking of all these things, how close these things are. Or even when you look at Tulsa, you know, I had the opportunity to talk to people from there on the show here with you. And just thinking about being in your home that night and waking up in the middle of the night and you see fire everywhere, your whole entire community, and the fear that I put on Black people. And we talk about why we're not as far as other communities, especially like when you're out here in LA, you see Koreatown, you see all these other Chinatown, you see little Armenia. Their communities weren't burned down like that. Rosewood. When you think of stuff like that, that is what I think has held us back and has put so much fear in us. Because we can forget a little bit about slavery because it was, it was a little bit further away. We can be like, slavery was abolished. But when you think of us just trying to live and exist and build wealth and have these careers and operate in these spaces as doctors, architects, artisans, and have everything we've built be burned down and destroyed every single time white America gets threatened by little Black America. That is, to me, what keeps holding us back from making big strides as people.
I couldn't agree with you more. I got like a few seconds left. Saying you talked about Rosewood. Sandy, one of our online culture crew members, she said, my grandmother was there for the Rosewood massacre to help those escaping. She was 98 when she passed, and she didn't want to talk about it, tell us about it, because she was still traumatized. Her grandmother.
That's insane. And I mean, the movie was traumatizing, so I couldn't imagine having lived through that experience, Farajii.
I couldn't imagine it. My brother, Damon Blissett. Damon, you said my great-grandfather and grandfather were sharecroppers. My dad used to travel the South as a child picking fruit, cotton, sugar, cane, and etc. Today, my father will not watch a slave movie, Farajii.
Trauma.
But here's the thing. That's the trauma. But that's the reason why we need to have conversations within our own families about this, because we won't be running to Hollywood to tell our story. You can hear directly from those who were impacted, those who were there, and those who were traumatized. Like our families have real trauma because of the institution of slavery, because of, like you said, the quote unquote the end of chattel slavery period going into the Reconstruction era and Jim Crow era. There's still a lot of pain and trauma. And guess what, man? And I said, and I'm going to keep saying it, we want to let people off the hook. We want to let this country off the hook. America got to pay for the pain she has caused and to the destruction of Black people and Black families. I don't care what nobody say. America's got to pay for this, man, because this shit ain't good and it ain't fair and it ain't right.
This the same way we feared.
I mean, look, I'm all for politics, progressive stuff. I'm all for us getting, but look, you ain't going, America can never forget. She got to feel the pain of what she has imposed on Black people in this country. And if Black folks in this country, if we keep thinking like she paid, she didn't pay. She hasn't.
When
did she pay?
When did she pay? When
America gotta pay for this, man. And I don't know what that would look like, but guess what? Forgetting, being in a state of denial is not payment. Rewriting history through Hollywood is not payment.
And I want us to be careful with learning from Hollywood movies, because we have to understand that a lot of times, like in the movie Harder They Fall, for instance, there were real characters in that movie, but they crossed timelines. So some of those characters weren't even around at the same time in history. So we have to be very careful with relying on Hollywood for truth, because those stories are a lot of times embellished. And so be careful too, like if it says inspired by a true story or based. If it's inspired by a true story, 9 times out of 10, they use real pieces, but it's a fictional story. So please be careful when you are depending on writers. Fact check. Check out who wrote it. What were the intentions behind the movie? What was the purpose of the film? Because you'll get a lot of misinformation. And that's not to say that I don't support those films. I do support those films. I just don't want us to rely on those films entirely for educating ourselves on our history. Okay, because those are for entertainment. Remember, a movie is still for entertainment.
Absolutely. Look, we got to take a great pause. Let me just be very clear, though. When I say payment, this ain't just talking about reparation. I'm talking about justice. I'm talking about justice, y'all. Okay. When we as the grandchildren or great-grandchildren of our family members who were literally a part of the institution of chattel slavery, and we got the great burden on us to try to reconcile that, to try to process that, to try to move on from that, to heal from that. I'm talking about justice. I ain't talking about just no check. Nah, fuck that. I'm talking about justice. And that's a different word that this country don't want to have a conversation about. You can say payment, you can say all that because that means money and so. No, I'm talking about justice. And when we say justice, we're talking about a divine intervention, justice, because this has gone too far, and too many people, too many good people, too many of our people have gone for. I got to take a quick pause. We'll go. Look, you know what? We'll continue once we get back. Stay with us, folks. A lot to talk about here on the final moments of the culture here on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Pull up a chair. Take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for a Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
We're all impacted by the culture, whether we know it or not. From politics to music and entertainment, it's a huge part of our lives, and we're going to talk about it every day right here on The Culture with me, Farajii Muhammad, only on the Black Star Network.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
All right, folks, welcome back. Let me bring Nira back into the frame here because Nira had something to say. I had to get to that commercial break, but I wanted to get your take on what I wanted you to get your thoughts out there because as we wrap up the end of the year,
I was thinking about reparations, Farajii.
Yeah, go ahead. Share your thoughts.
And I was like, because you were talking about justice, and we keep having this conversation about, where would this money come from for reparations? And I was thinking, what if all these businesses and corporations that benefited from slavery, wouldn't it be justice for them to be the ones to put together this big pot along with our government to give us reparations? I mean, Harvard is not going to starve if they give us some money and put it into the pot, or any of these other major corporations. Hell, I don't even care if like Louis Vuitton, any of those companies that have, fed off of Black misery, they should all be put in. Hell, Elon Musk, whose family is over there stealing rubies and emeralds in South Africa. You know what I'm saying? Like all those people and businesses that benefited from Black pain and suffering should be the ones giving us reparations.
I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more. It's not just about government, right? It comes from the companies that were built on our demise.
Yep.
Right? So you talking about, like what I say, from Wall Street to Hollywood, across the board, schools like you bringing up, Harvard. Harvard has a $50 billion endowment fund right now. They have the largest endowment, I believe, in the world. They
can't ease up on something.
They can't. So when we have this conversation, I'm saying like we're at the end of 2022. And one of the things I wanted to share is just like looking at these big moments in our culture that have shaped us, that have impacted us. And I think the one of the big moments is the discussion about reparations. It's the discussion about how do you usher in justice for people that have been broken and were used for the benefit and gain of everybody.
Of everybody.
Like, you really wouldn't have a modern civilization in this part of the world without Black folk pain, Black folk being in them cotton fields, Black folk dying. Like, let's keep it 1,000. It would not have happened. You would not have.
No, it wouldn't have happened because let's be real, white people were dying. They didn't come to America, to the Americas, or to this land and just have it all figured out. They didn't come here, like, oh, we found gold. They were dying. They were dying from sickness. They were dying because they couldn't tend the land. They, relied on the Native Americans once they were dying to help them survive. And then once they tried to use the Native Americans as slaves and they were dying from sickness and, not being able to actually do the work that, Black people could do, they were introduced to us through the Arabs. And I learned this in college in African diaspora, that the Arabs were the ones that were like, well, wait a minute. We know of people that are used to hard labor. We know of people that can work all day and tough in the sun and in, tough conditions. We trade with them all the time. And white people are like, well, we'll say word. We need them. Like, what's up? And, I'm like saying in a joking way, but that's honestly how it happened. And I was blown away to learn that because, again, growing up in schools, I was never taught that history. I was never taught that the Arabs were actually the middleman that actually told white people, like, I know somebody that could be your slave.
Right.
And so I think that's just really interesting. So, things didn't happen. It wasn't just like the white people came over here and slavery just started the first day or week or month or year. It was an evolution of them having this problem.
It was a conspiracy.
It was, they had a problem and they were trying to solve their problem. They could not tame the land here. They could not, white people just couldn't handle it. Neither could Native Americans, not in the way that we could. And so that is how we became enslaved.
And I'm glad that you brought that up because it just speaks to the level of, and I'm gonna use this word lightly, like the partnership of so many groups of people.
People at the table having discussions about us.
Discussion about us.
About us.
And guess what? That continues to happen. We had our big brother Sinedu on talking about the African Summit. That happens when you talk about the resources, the riches, the history
absolutely
of the continent of the motherland. That happens. I mean, that's happening all the time, that people are talking about us, dictating our future without us being present.
Yep, without us being present.
Without us being there. So I think that for the big things, and I want to shift gears from this with some big moments of 2022. The reparations conversation, I think, has certainly gained a lot of traction in this country. And I truly believe that in 2023, we're going to see more cities, more states having discussions about reparations. But what are some of the other big moments that you saw for the year?
Oh, gosh. I mean, didn't the whole abortion thing happen this year?
Big.
We've been losing our rights.
So we're gonna just put on the list, losing rights in 2022.
Oh gosh, 2022.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah, man. I mean, 2020. We've lost a lot of greats too. We've lost a lot of our big celebrities this year. Gosh, I mean, but I don't think 2022 was like a completely like crappy year.
No.
Honestly, I'm having like a brain freeze because 2022 was the year that I moved to LA. And so for me, it's all muddled with this transition of like this move. But yeah, like I think the abortion thing was like the big thing for me because I'm just like, yo, we're really losing our rights right now. And like, no one's talking about it. I think even with the whole January 6th committee, the whole idea that Trump could possibly run again. I mean, all of these things have just had me, inflation. Oh gosh, let's talk about that. Getting a pack of chicken was like chicken wings was like $20 in the Black community. And I was like, that's really messed up. Because in the white communities, the pack of chicken wings don't cost that much. But we just gonna leave that there.
Right.
But yeah, Farajii, what big stuff would you say happened this year?
Well, you know what? And I'm glad that I didn't have, and what's funny, because on my list, I did not have the abortion piece, but I think that opened up the door for us to have a better and much deeper conversation about the value of a woman's body. Women's reproductive rights.
Oh, I didn't know that word was even used anymore.
So we were just
what are we? We're like birth giving persons.
No,
persons who give birth. Didn't it get changed to that now? Now it's not
in
women.
some places,
2022 said women don't give birth.
Yeah, I don't look.
I was just like, that's what 2022 is a little weird.
It was a little weird. But you know, I wrote down his, and I'm looking through my notes right now. You know, I saw that. I mean, of course, one of the big moments was Ketanji Brown Jackson being placed on the Supreme Court. I think that was one of the biggest moments in terms of our history, in terms of the culture's big moment, right? Like we got a black woman on the Supreme Court, so that was a you know, a check. It wasn't an X; it was a check.
Beyonce dropped the album. So did SZA.
You were going to say it.
I'm just saying. They did.
Brittany Griner was captured and freed. Brittany Griner was captured in February.
Yeah.
And she was brought home in December.
Yeah.
So that's huge. That's a huge moment, right? The slap of Will Smith to Chris Rock.
Oh, yes. Yep. That was a big one.
So that was, and that brought up a whole different conversation.
Whew, that was a good one. That was like, it turned into black men don't protect black women.
I don't know.
You had to like pick a side. It was like sitting at the dinner table, like, all right, before you come in, whose side you on? Chris or Will?
You know what? I think 2022 is really that year now that like it requires you to always pick a team.
Yep.
So it's like,
can we talk about how shitty football has been this year? Because I don't know what's going on with these teams this year.
Yeah.
Football's been a little weird to me.
I think that sports in this country right now is under great scrutiny because we finally kind of broke through the barrier where we thought that sports was going to be that one space where we can kind of come together as a country and kind of forget about all of the other stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that that's slowly not the case. Like the outside world has kind of penetrated this sports force field. So where race and
I mean, that's been going on since our boy.
Who?
Kaepernick.
And that's what I'm saying. Kaepernick still has it's like the cloud, and I don't want to use the term cloud. So let me say that like the power of Kaepernick still is very strong in the sports world.
It was necessary. Everything that happened to Kaepernick, I believe, was divine. And I believe he is going to be great and successful and have a great life because he served a divine purpose. And so we're just going to leave that there.
Absolutely.
Why would divine people be mixed? I'm just moving on.
There we go. Look, let me just tell you, we're going to talk about it more tomorrow, folks, but it's interesting to see what are your big culture moments of 2022. There are a lot of moments. I mean, 2022 was a transformative year in so many different ways, and people are checking in and sharing their thoughts about it. Jawan, you said the slap still heard around the world. It sparked a lot of necessary conversations, though. It did. It really did.
The slap?
Huh?
The slap?
That's what it's called, the slap. The slap. There it is, the slap. All right, so I want to get to this final point because as we wrap up, I wanted to at least acknowledge the system. We know that, and this is very sad and unfortunate, but we also know that Buffalo was under extreme weather, 50 inches of snow over the Christmas weekend. And unfortunately, a young black woman by the name of Anniv Taylor, 22 years old, was found in her vehicle on Christmas Eve after she got stuck while traveling home in the snowstorm. Unfortunately, she passed away. She had called her family and told her she was stuck. They could not find her. It wasn't until someone had to recognize, like the person finally went to the car 2 or 3 times to see if someone was in there, finally saw her in there. She was a young black woman. She had passed away. She was just one of the ones that had died as a result of that very, very serious snowstorm in Buffalo. And so her family is in mourning. So let's give prayers up and good vibes to the family of Anniv Taylor, 22 years old. She was just returning home from working a shift at a hospital there in Buffalo, and she died while in the snowstorm. And you know, her mother was saying something. She was, of course, out of pain and anger, said that the city should have done more. But I will say, I don't think there's any city in America that is prepared for 50 inches of snow. Regardless of what you can do, how much ice, when that nature calls, there's the sister there. Thank you, Keenan and Ariel. When that's the sister, that's Andale Taylor. Tragic story.
I mean, think about that. I mean, 4 feet is 48 inches. So this is a little over 4 feet of snow.
Yeah.
You know, that's, you can't, we're human. We can't go up against God. We can't go up against the weather. We can't go up against the forces of nature. We are at the mercy of this earth. We are visitors here.
Yep.
On this planet.
Absolutely.
We don't have control over it. And I'm so sorry. I'm saddened. It's heartbreaking, and I pray for her family. But I don't think that anyone should be to blame here. I think that in a situation like that, everybody is trying their best in every way that they can. And I like to give New York as a state, you know, I think even since 9/11, when you think about their firefighters and the first responders in New York, I've never felt in my heart that they were the type of people who didn't care about their people. We've seen them die and put themselves on the line for their citizens. And so I think that we have to show a little grace, because we're at the mercy.
Yeah, I mean, look, when you're under extreme weather like that, it's hard to try to handle. And again, our hearts and prayers go to the family of Andale Taylor. Dear, thank you so much. We appreciate you. Thank you for being so good for the culture. And we will reconnect with you, God willing, next year in 2023. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, folks, that's going to do it for us. I thank each and every one of you. I thank my team. I thank Nira. I thank Brother Sinedu, and I thank you. Make sure y'all continue to support us here at Black Star Network. Go to our website at Black Star Network. Sign up for free. Download the app on all of your devices and follow us on all social media platforms at blackstarnetwork.com. Follow me on social media at The Real Farajii on IG and Farajii on Twitter. Love to continue to connect and build with you. And folks, God willing, tomorrow will be our final show for 2022, so make sure y'all tune in for that. All right, stay tuned. Up next is Roland Martin Unfiltered, RMU, Thursday night. You know how they do. Make sure y'all tune in for that. And as always, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong. Stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. God willing, we'll talk tomorrow for another exciting edition of The Culture here on the Black Star Network. Peace.